Hello again, Marek is here. So today we're going to talk about how to check the sign of a quadratic function, and of course I'm going to go through the canonical form of quadratic equation. So let's start. The canonical form of a quadratic equation, first you should have the function f of x, which is of course in the quadratic form ax squared plus bx plus c, and with the condition that a should be different than 0. What I should do next, in order to reach the canonical form, is to factorize, is to put a as a common factor. So what remains is x squared plus b over ax plus c over a. Now, the part where I have x squared plus b over ax, I will have to consider as the beginning of a perfect square. So I will have to group them. And what I should do next is add and subtract b squared over 4a squared. In order to have what? In order to obtain a perfect square. So once we proceed, as you can see in the parentheses, I'm adding b squared over 4a squared, and I'm subtracting b squared over 4a squared. Now, having this form, between the parentheses, I will obtain a perfect square, which can be factorized as x plus b over 2a to the power of 2. It's a perfect square. And whatever remains, I will have to do a common denominator, 4a squared. So what remains is b squared minus 4ac. Whenever you're reaching this stage of f of x, this is called the canonical form. Now the canonical form will be helpful in order to study the sign of the function. In this canonical form, I have b squared minus 4ac, which we already said previously, it's called discriminant or delta. So what happens if delta is positive? What happens if delta is negative? What happens if delta is equal to 0? We're going to check each condition apart. So let's start with delta, which is negative. What happens when delta is negative? Of course, as you can see, this is the canonical form where I replace b squared minus 4ac by delta. So I will have the fraction delta over 4a squared, delta negative, 4a squared positive. The fraction delta over 4a squared will be negative with the sign negative. So the whole fraction with the sign negative will be positive. When delta is negative, I can simply say it has no real root. So the polynomial cannot be factorized. So as you can see, the polynomial has no real root. It cannot be factorized. So between the brackets, the whole part will be positive. The function f of x will be affected by the sign of a. So I can say the polynomial has the same sign as a. A positive, the function positive. A negative, the function negative. Because just like we said previously, between the brackets, it's all positive. So let's check what happens if a is positive and a is negative. For a positive, x can take any value from minus infinity to plus infinity. The function will be strictly positive. Now, the curve which corresponds to a quadratic equation, it's called a parabola. Now this curve, as you can see, which is represented in red color, it's above the axis of abscissa, it's above x prime or x. Why? Because the function is positive. So it will be strictly positive. Any value of x, this curve will remain above x prime or x. What happens if a is negative? For any value of x going from minus infinity to plus infinity, the function will take the same sign as a, which is negative in this part. So f of x will be negative. The curve, which is a parabola, it will be in the negative part, so it will be below x prime or x. It cannot even touch x prime or x. There are no values for which it will reach 0. No, so it's strictly negative. Now let's take an example. We have the function f of x, 4x squared minus x plus 6. We have to calculate delta. Delta is b squared minus 4ac. It's minus 1 to the power of 2 minus 4 times 4 times 6. Delta is 1 minus 96. Delta is negative. What does it mean when delta is negative? Very simple. No real roots. And the function or the polynomial cannot be factorized. But there is a new information which we can add. We have to check the sign of a. A is 4. It's positive, which means the function will take the same sign as a. So this function will remain always positive, just like the sign of a. So what I can say is the function is strictly positive. For any value of x going from minus infinity to plus infinity, the function will remain positive. Okay, what happens if delta is equal to 0? When delta is equal to 0, the fraction minus delta over 4a squared will be 0. So my function f of x can be written as a times the factor x plus b over 2a to the power of 2. Of course, this is the factorized form of the function. I do have a factorized form, and since delta is equal to 0, I can say there is one real double root, which is called x0, which is minus b over 2a. Now, what happens to the sign of the function? I know the value of the real root, but what happens to the sign of the function? The function will take again the sign of a. Why? Because what I have between the parentheses is to the power of 2, so it will be positive. So a will be choosing the sign of the function. That's why I can say the polynomial has the same sign as a, or it is equal to 0. It's equal to 0 for x0. So whenever I'm going to replace x by x0, so minus b over 2a plus b over 2a, it will be 0. So the function will be equal to 0. Or else the function takes the same sign as a. Now let's check if a is negative or a is positive. The first one, a positive. As you can see, x going from minus infinity to plus infinity, but it will pass through the real double root x0. The function will be positive, just like the sign of a. It will be 0 for x0. That's why the curve, which is again a parabola, it will be on the positive side, so it will be above x prime or x, but it can reach 0 only for the value of x which is equal to x0. So the curve will be on the positive side, and it will be equal to 0 only for x which is equal to x0. What happens if a is negative? X will going from minus infinity to plus infinity. The function will be negative except for x which is equal to x0. And as you can see, the parabola will be below x prime or x. It's on the negative side. It's equal to 0 only for x is equal to x0, which is the real double root. Now let's take an example. As you can see, the function is minus 5x squared plus 20x minus 20. I will have to calculate delta. Delta is b squared minus 4ac. So it's 20 to the power of 2 minus 4 times a is minus 5, c is minus 20. 400 minus 400, delta is equal to 0. What does it mean? It means I have one real double root. So x1 is equal to x2, which will be equal to x0, just like we said previously. It's minus b over 2a. Minus b, it's minus 20 over 2a, 2 times minus 5. So the final result will be 2. Now, what I should do next is to check the sign of a, because I need to study the sign of this function. I know that it has one real double root, but I want to know also in which part it's positive, in which part is negative. But since delta is 0, I can say the function takes the same sign as a. A is negative, so this function will be always negative. Function will be always negative, except for x is equal to 2, the function will be equal to 0. The factorized form of the function is a times the second factor, so it's minus 5 times x minus 2 to the power of 2. This is the factorized form of this function. Now, let's discuss the last part. What happens if delta is positive? When delta is positive, f of x, a function, can be written as a times the first factor x plus b plus square root of delta over 2a times the second factor x plus b minus square root of delta over 2a. I can consider minus b minus square root of delta over 2a as x1 and the second one as x2 minus b plus square root of delta over 2a. So this function can be written as f of x, which is equal to a times the first factor x minus x1, the second factor x minus x2. In this case, I cannot say that the function has the same sign as a or the opposite sign as a. No, because we have a, and again the first factor and the second factor. So it is affected by 3 parts. That's why we need to go through a table. The sign of the polynomial could be deduced from the following table. So x going from minus infinity to plus infinity, passing by x1 and x2. In this case, I chose x1 smaller than x2, so it could be different, but in this case, that's the choice that I made. The first factor, x minus x1, will be 0 for x1. It will be positive on the right side since the coefficient of x is positive, and the negative on the left side of this 0. X minus x2 will be 0 for the value of x, which is equal to x2, positive on the right side, negative on the left side. The product of these two factors will be the product of minus times minus plus. 0 will remain 0, plus times minus, minus, 0 will remain 0, and plus times plus, plus. As for the function, it's the product of these 2 times a. So a also will affect the sign of the function. That's why whenever you have for the final function, you will have to say between the 2 zeros, you will have to choose the opposite sign of a, and outside the zeros, the same sign as a. Now, let's take the 2 examples for a which is positive and a which is negative. When a is positive, x going from minus infinity to plus infinity, the function will be plus minus plus. Why? Between x1 and x2, it's the opposite sign as of a. So a is positive, you will have to say it's negative between these 2 values. Outside x1 and outside x2, it will be positive, positive, the same sign as a. If you can check the parabola, it goes from positive values, it will reach for x1, the function will reach 0, which is on the axis of abscissa. It will take negative values between x1 and x2. For x2 it is equal to 0, and then it will be again positive. What happens if a is negative? So x going from minus infinity to plus infinity, the function will have alternating sign, but what you can deduce directly is between x2 and x1, the 2 distinct roots, you will have to choose the opposite sign of a. So a is negative, you will have to say it's positive between x1 and x2. Outside x2 and outside x1, it will be the same sign as a negative, negative. Now if you can check the parabola, It will start from negative part. It will reach 0 for x2, then it will be positive, it will reach 0 for x1, and then negative again. Now let's take a final example. The function that we have is the function f of x, 3x squared minus 4x plus 7. Of course I can do delta, but I can choose a minus b plus c, which is equal to 0, which will give me directly the first root and the second root. The first root is x1, which is minus 1, and the second root, it's x2 minus c over a. It's minus 7, it's 7 over a, which is 3, 7 over 3. So whenever you have a minus b plus c, one of the root is minus 1, and the second one is minus c over a. I cannot say that this function will take the same sign as a or the opposite sign of a. No, I will have to go through a table. So the table is for any value of x going from minus infinity to plus infinity, passing by minus 1 and 7 over 3. The function will be 0 for minus 1 and 0 for 7 over 3. Between these two values, between minus 1 and 7 over 3, the function takes the opposite sign of a. A is positive, so you will have to say it's negative between these two values. Outside minus 1 and outside 7 over 3, it will be the same sign as a, so it's positive, positive. So my function can be written as 3 times, this is a, the first factor x plus 1, the second factor x minus 7 over 3. So having this function, by calculating delta, I will be able to find the two distinct real roots whenever they exist, and I will be able to go through the table which will give me the sign of the function. I know that this function, it's positive for any value of x between minus infinity and minus 1, and from 7 over 3 till plus infinity. In these two parts it's positive, while the function is negative for any value of x between minus 1 and 7 over 3. And the function is equal to 0 for minus 1, and the function is equal to 0 for x is equal to 7 over 3. So this is the table which will summarize the sign of the function, and of course this is the table that I'm using for delta positive. Delta is negative, it's the same sign as a. Delta is equal to 0, again it's the same sign as a. That's all for today. I hope this was helpful to you. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and of course I'm gonna share with you my Instagram account or Facebook account. You can subscribe to my channel in order to receive notification whenever I add new videos, and I hope this was helpful. Have a good day and goodbye.